Hello and welcome to Worklog. I'm Sean Hickman. I'm an iOS developer who makes an app called Sofa, which helps you to be more intentional with your downtime. And Worklog is a podcast where I share my journey building Sofa into a successful indie app business. And I cover, things I've learned, challenges, insights, all that kind of stuff. And in today's episode, I'm going to talk about a big thing that I just recently launched, which is Sofa's podcast player. Just launched that 2 weeks ago now. A week ago. And then there's a lot to talk about there. And then I'll talk about kind of like what's next for the podcast player and then for Sofa itself. So lots to get into. Before I get into the podcast stuff and how the launch went and everything, just a little bit of small talk. There's a couple fun little things that I kind of ran into recently that I just want to share and talk about. The first one, these are not in any order, it's kind of random, is this thing called CommunityKit. And this is where, so Charlie Chapman, who he develops Dark Noise and another app called Framous, which I'm actually going to be talking about in a second. So he kind of put together this, him and a few other people, I believe, put together, actually, yeah, there's like 8 people here or something. Maybe he didn't do this. Actually, maybe Charlie didn't do this. Maybe he just shared it and I saw it. Regardless, there's this thing called CommunityKit, and this is kind of important with WWDC coming up in June. And basically there's this problem, and I don't have tons of experience with this because I've been to WWDC twice. Once I think it was 2018 I went, or 2019. It was like very early days of Sofa. And then I went last year, and this was at Apple's new campus and stuff like that. But one of the things that I found to be challenging, and I know other people did too, was like, okay, there's the main event from Apple, which happens, and that's essentially just one day. And, you kind of go, if you get a ticket, you get to go and experience all that stuff. But, you might be there for an entire week. And even though Apple has sessions and stuff that you can go to every week, now it's not in person. All that stuff is virtual. So it's kind of like if you say you travel all the way there and then you want to then you want to do a session, you have to sit in a hotel room and talk to an Apple person remotely, which is kind of weird because it's I'm here, let's go talk. Anyway, what people have done for years, from what I understand and from what I've experienced the few times I've gone, is there's other events and meetups and just different things throughout the week because there's a ton of people in town. There's people who obviously live there, but then there's other people too who travel in. And it's always, it seems like, again, I'm just speaking from my experience, but it was pretty challenging to know what events and meetups existed, where to go to look for this stuff, especially with not everyone's on the same social network anymore. So things are just kind of splintered, and it was a little challenging to find that stuff. So you kind of piece things together. And I know Paul Hudson would have a GitHub page with a bunch of stuff, which was very helpful. But this is, and I thought it was Charlie who did this because I remember talking to him last year about this. About him, this idea of a community kit. So that's kind of why I'm connecting it to him, but maybe he didn't do this. But anyway, the idea is that, this community kit is a way for the community to kind of centralize those kind of events and planning and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's pretty sick. And so if you're someone who is thinking about going to WWDC, even if you don't get a ticket, so you just want to be in town and meet other people and go to different events and stuff like that, this seems like it's going to be very helpful. So I have not gotten a ticket to WWDC this year. Sometimes they do like a second round of like a lottery system. That's the word I was looking for. So I'm hoping I get a ticket for the second round. If I don't get a ticket for the actual Apple event, I might go. I might not go. I haven't decided yet. So, but anyway, if I end up going, I'll definitely be using CommunityKit to kind of, stay in touch with what's going on and where to go and all that kind of stuff. So, and actually it looks like the Hyatt House in San Jose, you can get a discount. That's pretty nice. All right, sweet. Yeah, so if you're going to WWDC or thinking about it this year, check out CommunityKit. I'll have a link to all the stuff in the description. But very cool. Wanted to share that with people if you're looking to get into that. Now, I know this is definitely by Charlie Chapman, but I wanted to talk about, he launched an app, I guess I'm trying to think how recently it was. Maybe, I don't know. I feel like I was aware of it a couple weeks ago, but it's an app called Framous, and it essentially just makes it really easy to make screenshots for your app that's in a device. And this is something that every developer has to do at some point, whether they want screenshots for the App Store or for the website or whatever they want to do. And over the years, I've done things where someone made a sketch template or a Photoshop template or something like that, and I've used those. But then they get out of date because there's a new device. You have to figure that out. And then for a long time, I used the Federico Vitici made a shortcut from Mac Stories. He made a shortcut where you could take a screenshot and run a shortcut, and it would put it in the correct device, and then you could export it, which is actually extremely good, and something I would still use today because it's just kind of seamless. You take a screenshot and you can run the shortcut. But I actually tried Framous this time around because it's a Mac app. I can take screenshots and just send them to my Mac and then kind of make the ones that I want. You can choose which device and stuff like that. And this was really, really helpful. I was a big fan of this. And I'm trying to think. Yeah, I think there was a lifetime option I bought or something like that. Anyway, if you're a developer and you have to make screenshots of your app and you want to include a device, this was really awesome. So definitely worth checking out. Very good. Nice job, Charlie. Nice job. I told you it's going to be random. So if you're watching this and you've watched the other ones, you know that I've been on a little bit of a camera journey for video. I feel like my photography camera, I feel very happy with that. I'm using the Leica Q2 for that. I've used a lot of different cameras over the past few years, different lenses, all that kind of stuff. And the Q2, I have a deep connection to that camera now, and I really love it for a lot of reasons. I've made videos about that, so you can go watch it. But for video, I've been trying a lot of different stuff. I've used Sony stuff before this, and the Sony stuff was always really good, very reliable. But I wanted to, I basically experimented with I wanted to simplify my setup. And I was going through this phase of what if I don't care about lighting, and I don't care really what it looks like. And it's just all about the ease of flipping the camera on and just recording stuff. And so I've done a couple videos like that, and I've used a series of cameras for those things. And most of them have been, so the one was the DJI Osmo Pocket 3. And I tried a few action cameras as well. So DJI Action 5 Pro, Insta360, Go 3S, all those kind of things, my phone, whatever. And besides my phone, I'll talk about my phone in a second, but I was just never happy with the picture quality. And I know that goes against what I just said, where it's I just want to, just let it rip. And I don't care about setting up a light, but it's hey, for this video right now, I set up a light. right? I'm on a nicer camera. I have nice audio, right? All those things. And I think, and this is where like, this is the journey I went on with photography, which you kind of just have to do stuff. Or I had to do stuff to figure out what my needs are and what I want out of the experience of photography and now, doing video too. And for the video stuff, one of the main things I learned is I want the quality to be very good. I want it to look very good because it's like, I mean, geez, if you're going to watch this, why not make it look nice, right? Why not do that instead of, the action camera is like, it's just like too wide. And I don't like that look at all. The other thing is that I was finding those cameras to be very unreliable, and specifically the Osmo Pocket 3, which is like, I think the idea of that camera is amazing, but it was so unreliable for me where there was multiple times I would record video and I would just be out of focus for the whole video. And you couldn't tell on like the little screen that's there because it's so small. You'd be like, I think I'm in focus. I'm good. And like right now I'm shooting on a Sony again. And like, I just trust this camera, right? Like this, I know that I'm going to be in focus. I can literally see the little box in my eye. This camera is so reliable. So I'm shooting on the Sony FX30. It's got a built-in fan, so I don't have to worry about overheating or anything like that, because now that I'm doing the podcast, these videos are just long. And the last thing I want to do is worry about, oh my God, is this camera going to overheat or something? Those little cameras, they just weren't doing it for me. They weren't like, I wasn't getting excited when I was editing that footage or anything like that. So it wasn't doing it for me. And if you use those cameras and they work for you, great. But I have learned that's not the experience I'm looking for. And one of the videos that I recorded for the launch of the podcast, because I didn't have the Sony camera yet, I actually used my phone. So this is an iPhone 16 Pro Max. And I shot an Apple Log, and it was like the first time I really tried Apple Log. And I was blown away with the picture quality you could get out of this thing. Like, unbelievable. And when I saw it, it was like so much better than what I was getting out of the Pocket 3 or, any of the action cameras, that I was like, and I think a lot of that too is the lens, where this is on the iPhone, the main lens is a 24 millimeter. Pocket 3 is a 20, and then all the other ones are like much wider. And I think I prefer that field of view, the 24 and above for video. 20 is good. I do like 20. But 24 just feels a little more normal-ish for video, which is weird because when I take pictures with a 24, it feels very wide. But for video, I'm like, yeah, this feels good. But anyway, so I got rid of all those little cameras. And now my setup for the foreseeable future is going to be, I want a studio camera, which is the Sony that I'm shooting on now. This thing needs to be very reliable. So I know the autofocus is going to be great. I know with the built-in fan on this camera, I don't have to worry about overheating. I can run it for as long as it needs to run. I can hook up all different types of microphones to it. Like if I want to use wireless microphones, or if I want to, do like an XLR. Like right now I'm just recording into my computer. But I can kind of rig it out to be more professional when I want it to be. And I'm not a professional videographer here, right? But I can do all that stuff if I want, and I can just depend on it, and I can focus on, talking, right? I don't want to be thinking about the camera. I just want to be talking and, making the video I want to make. And the Sony lets me do that. And I'm like very happy to be back on a Sony camera for video, because I just find them to be very good. And then for everything that's more like on the go, where I don't want to bring a bigger camera like this, I've been so impressed with the Apple Log on my phone. I'm like, well, I'll just shoot it on my phone, right? Like I'm not like a vlogger, but like if I want to shoot a video where I'm like I'm in the car and I want to like set the phone. I'll just set the phone up, right? And I can add microphones to this if I need to. But the built-in mic is great, and for like little clips and stuff like that, I'm like, this is awesome. I'll be able to match the iPhone and this Sony pretty well, and I feel like that combo is pretty good. So happy to be back on a Sony, and I'll probably make like after I use this combination for a few months, I'll probably make a dedicated video about it. But for now, I'm happy with it. Now the next thing, are there any Goofy movie fans out there? Has anyone, there's probably people who are hearing me say that, they're like, what the hell is that? But, so Goofy movie came out in early 90s, mid 90s. And that was like, I was born in 86, so that was like a prime age for me. Love that movie, like love it. And my wife loves it too. My brothers, all that stuff, we love it. And probably one of the best parts and like the things I remember the most is the music, with Powerline. Just so good. So good. But anyway, they did a documentary about the making of that movie, and it's called Not Just a Goof. And it's on Disney Plus. And so me and my wife watched it over the weekend, and it was awesome. Like, it was just like, obviously I haven't seen that movie in a while. I listen to the music, I would say like somewhat frequently, a couple times a year I'll listen to those songs. But the documentary is so good because it's like, this, like if you ever, any kind of like movie you love or say like an artist, making an album, you watch the behind the scenes, like it's just fun to watch that stuff. And this was so good. And like, the part about, there's like a part where they get into the music and how they made it and what they were thinking when they put it together and how they did the dancing, and man, so good. Love it. So I recommend it. So if you're a Goofy movie fan, highly recommend watching this documentary. Not Just a Goof. Links will be in the description for all this stuff, so you'll be able to jump there. Okay, that is enough small talk. So let's talk about the podcast player launch. So if you don't know, Sofa, I built a podcast player into Sofa, and it's something I started it in September of 2024 and then launched it April 2nd of 2025. So it took a good amount of time, and I've been kind of documenting my progress with that through a few videos on this channel and the podcast and stuff. I'm not going to go into details specifically about what the podcast player is. You can watch other videos about that. So this is more about like the launch. So I'm going to talk about what the lead up to the launch was like, what I was doing, the kind of launch day and week, and then some stuff for after the launch, like what I've been working on and what's kind of coming next. But it's interesting. So this was a major launch. And with any kind of software, there's times where you have like larger updates, and then most of the time it's just smaller stuff, whether it's bug fixes or little improvements. But this was a major update, and there was a lot of prep. It's not just about the app itself and making sure it works and, there's no bugs and it does what it's supposed to do. But there's just a lot of prep leading up to it. So there's getting things ready for the App Store, writing release notes. I have to update the description. I added a new screenshot for the podcast player itself so that people can see that it does play podcasts. And then there's the website. I made updates to the website. I made videos, all that kind of stuff. Reached out to the press, and that's probably, I've talked about the press stuff before. That probably deserves like a dedicated video or podcast about that, because there is a lot to talk about there. If you have any questions about that, you can put them in the comments or shoot me an email. and I can factor that into something in the future. But one of the things I did is I made 2 videos, and I I didn't initially intend to make 2 videos. First, I was like, I'll just make 1 video that kind of goes through everything, right? That kind of stuff. But I actually ended up making 2, and I like this combination. I'll probably do it in the future for major updates again. And one video was just like as quick as possible. Here's like the top stuff in the new podcast player. So if you don't really care about getting into the details, you can watch this video. It's like, I think it's under 2 minutes. And then it kind of explains like basically what it does. And then the other one was a full walkthrough, which like, if you want to get into the weeds on what everything does in the podcast player, you can watch this video that's 20 minutes long and it goes into all those details. So I made those 2, and it was funny after making those videos. That's when I was like, all right, I have to get a proper camera again, because while I can do a lot on my phone and you can kind of rig it out, it's just like inconvenient for me unless I had a separate phone just for that. So because I use my phone for notes all the time. So like when I'm recording, I'll have notes on my phone. So anyway, so I was like, I got to get a proper camera again. Like, this is so annoying. So I made those 2 videos, and I'm happy with the one video. I'm like, okay with the other one, but I was like running out of time, so I couldn't really like do it again. The like 5 best things in Sova, like the quick video, I'm pretty happy with. That's the one I shot on the iPhone. And then the full walkthrough one is, actually shot that on the iPhone too, but I'm just not as happy with that one. Mostly because of like the quality, like the video quality and the audio quality. I'm just like, But yeah, so I did those. And then for the website, I did a bunch of updates for the website, and I'll have this like linked and stuff like that. But the main thing I wanted to do was, one of the main things is, and I really learned this with when I worked in consulting as a designer, which is like you kind of always need to have, if you're going to be sharing something with someone or doing a presentation or something, like you need props. And your props can be a slide deck, it can be a prototype, it can be so many things, right? And I knew that for the podcast player, I wanted to have just one page on the website that I could just easily share with anyone. If they said, oh, you have a podcast player, I just wanted to share whatever with it, I could just give them that page and they could get all the information they needed to. And then, I can shoot out to different parts of the website too. But on this page, this is where, I have the main video, that short video. So you can just, if you don't want to read anything, just watch the video and you're good. But then it goes in just the main thing, and it has nice images in here showing what the actual UI looks like. So even if you're not reading stuff, you can skim through this and hopefully you go, oh, this looks pretty good, right? You can just read the headlines and look at the screenshots and say, wow, this looks good. And then it kind of goes through that. It has a video to the deeper dive. And then, that's kind of it. But like, I knew for sure I wanted to have that single page to be the prop. And I'm a big fan of having like a very robust website for your app. I don't think enough developers do it. Indie developers, I think you need to put more work into your websites. Because it's such an easy tool to share with people, right? And I feel like a lot of times people will share links to the App Store page, which makes sense because you want someone to download it. But honestly, there's a lot of times where I'm like, I kind of just want to look at like a website, not the App Store. And you can put a link to download on the website, right? Like people can still get there. So that's like the first thing I really focused on, which was, all right, I need to have this like landing page, because this was kind of critical for me to reach out to the press. Because when I reached out to the press, I like reach out to different people, but then I wanted to have something to give them so that they could check it out and see it. So that's where like there was a couple things that had to be done before I could even reach out to the press. So I had to make the videos, number one. So I had those videos, up on YouTube as unlisted, so people could still watch them, but you wouldn't see them. And then I had to have this page together so that I could share all that stuff, and it would be very easy if someone that I reached out to wanted to, say, try Sofa, download the beta or to start writing about it or whatever, they could do all that. So I just find that these are kind of like very helpful and I think necessary tools if you're going to share stuff with people, especially ahead of launch. But even after launch, this is like so helpful because I know 6 months from now or a year from now, I'm gonna get an email, I'm gonna get a message on some social network where someone's gonna ask me specific questions about the podcast player, and I can just send them links, right? Whether that is like support documentation or this page or a YouTube video or something. So like doing all that work now makes things in the future for me very, very easy because I don't have to re-explain stuff to people. I can just say, hey, check this out, right? And they can kind of watch the video or read something. So I spent a lot of time on this stuff, and this is where like all these screenshots, this is where I used Framous for that, and it was awesome. So I basically just like took screenshots on my device, put them in the Framous, and then kind of I actually like made everything in Sketch. But I mean, these are very easy to put together. But yeah, I just found that to be so helpful. So helpful. The other thing I did, which was, this is like part of the app, but also part of the website, which is I implemented universal links for podcast. So with Sofa, you can deep link into different parts of the app, but that's all. You have to have the app installed to do that. And if you have the app installed, you can, and all those links are like personal to you. So if you want to link to like a specific item in your list or, a list itself or whatever, you can do all that. But for this, I want it to, there's also like this other part of, I guess, let me step back a little bit. This is like, there's this whole podcast ecosystem, right? So you have the podcast player that is the tool itself to like listen to podcasts. And if you subscribe, you listen to it, you get new episodes, all that kind of stuff, right? Sofa does that. There's other podcast players that do that. But there's also the ecosystem around podcast. So, and this is like partly on the consumer side and then partly on like the creator side. And I'm still learning a lot of this stuff because even though I've listened to podcasts for years, I've never made a podcast player before. This is my first time making a podcast myself, so I'm intentionally doing all this stuff so I learn the ecosystem around it. And what's interesting is if you go to, I'm trying to think of, I don't know, certain shows. Say you go to their website or something for their podcast or whatever. I know a lot of people probably don't do that. They probably just go to their podcast player and search. But if you've ever seen those buttons like listen on Apple Podcasts or listen on Spotify or listen on Overcast, those buttons, you probably really didn't think about them too deeply. You just click them if they apply to you. And then you click that button and then it opens the app to that page for the specific podcast. And then you can subscribe and listen to episodes and all that stuff. I wanted that experience in Sofa. So I knew that would be an important part long-term for more people using Sofa and knowing about Sofa. And it's a combination between like the consumer side, the people who just listen, just listeners, and then the people who create, right? So how do they link to their shows, right? Do they link to all the players, to some of the players? What do they do? So I wanted to do this now, and I'm expecting this uptick to be, I don't know, very slow or basically zero for a while, because there's just a lot of, the podcast player market is very competitive. I know that, but I wanted to put in the infrastructure now so that it could grow in the future. So I made this tool. So I'm going to talk about universal links in a second, but But anyway, so I made this tool on the website, and it's called the Podcast Button Builder. And this is essentially for if you are a podcast creator, right? Like, or a producer or whatever, like you have your own show, and say you want to link your show directly to Sofa, and the same way you would link to Apple Podcast or Spotify or Pocket Cast, Overcast, whatever. I wanted to make that as easy as possible. And I knew that there's a couple things that people would need. Maybe they would need a graphic, right? Like an actual little button that says that. Maybe they would just want a link or something. But I wanted to put this tool together because any kind of friction when it comes to getting that information for a podcast producer, like there's so much involved in this stuff. Like the show I do is this is so simple, and this is a ton of work. And, I'm still trying to like get through the workflow and get everything nailed down. But there's just like a lot to do as you're kind of producing a show, the before, the during, the after, all that stuff. So anyway, so I put this tool together, and this tool is intentionally as simple as possible. And the idea is that you just get your podcast, whatever podcast you're listening to, and I give you a couple options. You can either search, you can just start typing in the name of the show. If you know your iTunes ID, you can put that in. Or if you just want to put in an RSS feed because maybe your specific show isn't listed on Apple's thing or whatever, you just want to use RSS. But I'm going to do this now. So if you're not watching, if you're watching, you're getting a nice little demo. So you can type in Worklog, right? Search results come up. And then what happens is you can choose a button style. And then you can choose light mode. You can choose dark mode. You can choose just an icon, whatever you want to do, right? Again, this is all intentionally very simple. And then you just use it. So if you want to just embed it on your site, you can just click copy and just kind of plop that in. If you just want the URL, right, you can just hit copy. Or if you want to download the, SVG or the PNG that will do all those things, like you can do that too, right? And this looks very basic, but there's a lot going on here. And specifically with this link. So now, if you notice, there's this link that says sofahq.com/subscribe/ and then iTunes and then like a specific ID. If you do not have Sofa installed and you click on one of those links, it'll actually take you to Sofa's website with basic information about that show. So it'll show the title, the image, and then a little description, right? And then it'll have a button to open it in Sofa, which, you can do. And then if you don't have Sofa, you can download it from the App Store, right? So this seems very basic, but now if you already have Sofa installed, it will just deep link. It won't take you to the website. But then it'll deep link you into the app, which then you can just hit, just essentially subscribe to a podcast, which is really nice. And this is the kind of infrastructure where you probably have used that multiple times, but you really haven't thought about it. But if it wasn't there, it would feel broken. And so I wanted to put that effort in now so that when people or if podcast creators start to link to Sofa directly, it just works, no big deal. And people, they just go, yeah, that's exactly how it should work. But that was all new stuff for me to kind of figure out how to do that and, building that tool on the website and stuff like that. But I'm very glad that I did it. Very glad I invested in it because I think long-term it's going to end up saving me time and making everyone's life easier, which is good. And again, it just gets back to, I just see so much value in the website. It's like, I can use it for communicating a new feature, right? Or building a very specific tool that does a very specific thing. Like, it's just so helpful. And I think more indie app developers should focus more on their website and making that a strong presence, because it's just a great prop to use in so many situations. Yeah, so the website was like, there was a ton of work with that, but I'm really happy with how it turned out. So if you want to check out, I'll leave links for everything if you want to check those out. So I'm still in the lead up to the launch, gang, still there. There was like a couple bugs. One in particular that was like, oh my God, it was like so friggin' hard to fix, because, you know, there may be developers who listen to this and go, well, Sean, you're a moron. But I find that the crash reports from SwiftUI views are just like way less helpful than crash reports from UIKit. And it's just like not, some things I'm like, all right, I think I fixed it. Like I just went back and forth with beta testers for a while on a very specific SwiftUI crash. And like, oh man, I don't know. I feel like I have a lot of thoughts on SwiftUI, but I don't know if all of them, I don't even know if most of them are positive at this point. I find UIKit to just be, we're getting back to reliability again, right? I was talking about cameras, right? I'm back on the Sony because I can trust it. It's reliable. I understand how it works. And UIKit feels like that for me. And SwiftUI, I'm like, what the hell's going on? But anyway, that's a whole other thing. And then another change I made, there was, you know, this update required more slightly more server stuff than it has in the past. I implemented a different like little API on my side to manage the APIs. So like Sofa talks to a few different services for different data, right? So for movies and TV shows, that's one source. For video games, that's another source. For books and podcasts and stuff, it's a different source. And some of those sources, you have to use what's called an API key. And I basically like revamped how I have that set up remotely, so that it's easier for me to make changes without requiring an app update, to make things a little more secure and all that stuff. So this launch was like kind of a big test for that infrastructure as well. And so far it's been good. But yeah, so just like a lot of kind of invisible infrastructure stuff that went into this, you know, this update leading up to it. That wasn't just about the app, but like a lot of stuff around the app. But anyway, so leading up to launch, yeah, and it was like, it's been probably the past month, I guess, because it was like a few weeks before the launch, and then now it's been almost 2 weeks after. Just like a bit of a grind. But I'm getting to a point where things are much more steady, which is good. All right, now let's talk about the launch day, the week, all that kind of stuff. And leading up, like the launch day for something and leading up to it, I'm always very nervous that there's some unknown bug that is like catastrophic. And I've done tons of releases now, at this point for Sofa, but I still have that anxiety. And this is why I do beta testing for, significant periods of time for new features. Looking at crash reports, all that kind of, like, I try and put a lot of steps in place to make sure things are good, a lot of testing. But, there's always the anxiety that'll probably never go away, that like, oh man, I hope there's nothing major, right? And there wasn't, which is good. So thank goodness. One of the things on launch day, I did not know, there's so much prep going up to a launch, and like, I didn't think to check, hey, is there something else launching that day? And the Nintendo Switch 2 announcement was that day. So I'm like, oh, had I like known that beforehand, I probably would have done a different day for the launch, because I think like the types of nerds who would be interested in Sofa's launch would also be interested in Nintendo Switch 2. I have no idea if there's any impact on that, but like, it's just like, I would just like to just factor that out. Right. And I would have done either like, well, not the day before, because that would have been April 1st, which is April Fool's Day. So I would probably just do the next day. But whatever, what are you going to do? That's like the hard part. That's one of the downsides of it just being me, which is like, when I'm prepping for a launch, I kind of go into this bubble because you like, I find I need to turn a lot of stuff off and to tune out so I can focus on getting a ton of work done. Cause it's not just getting the app ready to go, but all the other stuff surrounding it. And this was a miss from me. So like, I think I'm going to I have like a launch to-do list because I can't remember everything. So I'm going to be adding something like this to my checklist to just like, hey, just do like a Google search for some other things that are maybe coming out that day. You can't think about everything, but like this was kind of an obvious one where I was like, oh yeah, duh. I would have just waited. But all good. No worries. But on that note, I did get some decent press, which is good. Not exactly on that day. That's why I said like launch day / week. I think like I was explaining this to my wife where like, I feel like I've done enough of these, slightly larger launches for an indie, I should say, where I've learned that like, don't put everything into launch day and hoping that everything happens on launch day, because that's not realistic. It's really like the launch day, week, month kind of thing, because people got other stuff going on. Not everyone's going to pay attention on that day. And even if people know about it that day, it may take some time to kind of let that information get out, or for other people to kind of pick it up, other like people in the press or creators to kind of pick that stuff up and talk about it. So David Pierce's installer newsletter for The Verge. So he wrote about that, or he mentioned it in that newsletter, but he also had me be the every week they kind of ask, a screen share, like, hey, share your screen and talk about your apps and the apps you have on your device and stuff like that. So I was that person for that week, which is great because, number one, I really like that newsletter. It's also like, it's not just a link to Sofa, which is, which I like, but also I get to link to my YouTube channel and all different stuff. So like that drove a ton of traffic, which was amazing. There was a post on 9to5Mac, which is really nice, and it was linked to by Stephen Hackett with 512 Pixels, also incredibly nice. And like, there may be other stuff in the future that'd be great, but I don't know. You do the best you can with this stuff, and you try and tell as many people as possible over time, right? Not just like on that day. So yeah, so the launch day and week was good. There were no major hiccups or anything like that. Thank goodness. And I feel like, all things considered, like a decent amount of press and coverage for it. And, I view this as like the 1.0 for the podcast player. So like there's still tons of stuff to do. And that leads into the post-launch. So, all right, so the launch is done. That first day, I feel relieved. And there's a lot of feelings after the launch, which is like, I'm very tired. So I'm just like, I just kind of want to chill. But also I'm like keeping an eye on everything, looking at servers and analytics and stuff like that, making sure there's no issues coming in, support emails, that kind of stuff. So I think like my biggest feeling after the launch is just relief that it's, number one, it's exciting that it's out, right? But I'm just like, I just feel relieved that it launched successfully with nothing major happening. And it is fun to just like share your work, right? Like, if you're someone who makes stuff, like you work on stuff for a long time, you put a lot of effort into it, and it's like at some point you got to share it. And if you never share it, it's kind of like, you're just doing it for you, which is fine. But yeah, just relief and happiness and all that stuff. But also especially after like a big launch like this, I know there's going to be bugs, and that's why I have to launch, right? Because like the test flight beta or the beta process can only reveal so much because there's only so many people who are going to beta test. Some people, when they beta test, it's like they're kind of beta testing, they're kind of not. Some people give a ton of feedback, which is great. So you just have a wide range of feedback and stuff. But you hit a point where like you either start hearing the same feedback or you're not hearing enough feedback. And then it's like, all right, this is time to launch. It's time to go and get it out in the real world, because then you're going to get real feedback. And there's been tons of bugs that I've fixed, and feedback that has come in. And like, that was the plan going into this, which is like, okay, I'm going to launch it. And I know for the next few weeks after the launch, I'm still going to be like very locked in, getting releases out, with tons of bug fixes and improvements and stuff like that. And like, that's really the main focus initially. People have sent a lot of feedback in for, hey, are you planning to do this or that, or, maybe this in the future, that kind of stuff. All that stuff is welcome, and I love getting it, because I kind of like log it somewhere else, keeping a little note. But my primary focus, and my focus has been after the launch, to just fix all the bugs that I come across, right? Or that people have reported, or, I see crash logs coming in and stuff like that. And there's even bugs that like, I've been using this thing as my personal podcast player since October, I think, end of October. And even after the launch, there was bugs that I experienced that I hadn't experienced for a couple months. So it's just like, this stuff just kind of creeps up, and, there can be edge cases and weird things that happen. But yeah, that's been my primary focus after the launch, is just get things to be very solid, reliable, fix the bugs, make everything work as it should work. And, and that's really what I've been focused on. So once I get through this period, I actually have another update in review right now. So maybe by the time you watch this, it'll be out. After this period of like, okay, the app is now in like a good, stable, area. I don't know what word to use. It's in a stable, I'm brain farting here. It's in a stable situation. I don't know. So, there's always bugs. You can't, there's nothing, I don't think there's anything that exists that is bug free. That's insane. But once things are stable, I can then start to focus on like, okay, what is next? I'm going to step back. I'm going to kind of digest the feedback I've gotten, and not even just the feedback I've gotten, but like, I have my own ideas for how to evolve the podcast player itself, and things that I knew weren't going to fit into this initial release. So I want to kind of like digest all that stuff. But the thing I'm going to do before that is I'm going to like step away from, take a little break, right? So once things are solid, I'm going to take a little break, give myself some distance, because like I've been in this thing for months, and I think I need a little perspective before I start making decisions about what is next, right? So that's where things are at right now. One interesting note was like seeing some reactions to the podcast player from people. It felt very binary. The feedback was either, oh, this makes so much sense. I 100% understand why you would do this and why this makes sense in Sofa and not as like a separate app. And then there was other people who were just like, I don't get it. Like, why would you do this? So, and like both of those are correct and totally fine. And that's like the beauty of software and like this kind of ecosystem we're in, which is like, you don't have to have one app that is for everybody, right? Like the idea is you have choice. You can choose different options for different things. And just because you love something doesn't mean someone else is going to love it, and vice versa. So, but it was funny to see some of that feedback for the podcast player, because people either were like yeah or like nah, that's stupid. So all good either way. Doesn't bother me at all. And then post-launch, the API server stuff has been working well. So all good there. No major issues. Lots to talk about with the podcast player. I could go on for a really long time with this stuff. All right, so what's next? Let me talk about what's next, what I'm thinking is next for the podcast player. And I have a roadmap. You can check this out at any time. I update it periodically. I have a note at the top saying like nothing is committed to until I'm like actually doing it. And for the podcast player, there's things like there's so much more I want to do with Sofa. I feel like I've worked for years at this point, right? There's so much I want to do. But I think like there's a couple things in my planning bucket where I have like podcast player improvements. I have Sofa events, tracking progress and goals. And like if I did decide right now what to do, I would probably focus on the podcast player improvements and just like iterate on that really quickly and try and get the newer features out there. Just because like, hey, it's a big new feature, get that in a good spot for people before I start creating another brand new feature. But I also don't know, right? That's why I want to give myself a little distance and like take a little time off, because maybe I come back and say, you know what, I'm going to focus on Sofa events or something, or tracking progress and goals, right? Like these are also very big features that some people have been asking for, some people haven't, but I think they make sense within the product. So we'll see. So nothing here is committed to, but for the podcast player, I have this is just some of the stuff. Like I have a very long list of things to think about and consider. But some of the stuff is like stuff that I had planned, but I just didn't really get to with the initial release. So there's going to be some like pro features. These are like the paid stuff for skip silence, voice boost, being able to add your own audio files. I've actually had that experience before where like someone sends me an audio file. And I was like, oh, I want to listen to this on my phone. So being able to add your own audio file would be nice. An Apple Watch app. And so the Apple Watch app is something where I don't know. This kind of feels like the CarPlay situation where I knew I wanted to do CarPlay and I wanted CarPlay to be there day one. But I remember when I like kind of wrote that out, I was like, I don't even know what's involved in CarPlay. Like I technically, I don't understand what it is and all that stuff. So I didn't really know, like I wrote it down, but I didn't know what I was going to be getting into. And luckily the CarPlay stuff was like pretty straightforward, which is good. The Apple Watch app, it's another situation where like I don't know what I'm getting into here. So it might be technically a pain in the ass or it might be fine. But I do know and understand that there are people who listen to podcasts from their watch, maybe as like they're running or going for a walk or something. They don't have their phone with them and they want to be able to listen to podcasts from their watch. So like, I totally get that. I'm not that person. I have an Apple Watch. I'm actually like kind of falling out of love with my Apple Watch a little bit, but I understand there's a lot of people who they want that functionality on their watch. So because they'll go out without their phone. So that makes sense. Also like the player, the actual like podcast player UI, I think on the phone it's great. I think it works really nicely, all that stuff. But on the iPad, the Mac and the Vision Pro, it's not great. I think it's fine. I think it kind of gets the job done, but it's just like presented as a modal in the middle of the screen, and you can dismiss it and you get like the mini one and stuff. But this is another one where it's like, okay, I do want to make a slightly more custom, better experience for those platforms. But like for this initial release, there's so much involved with like creating a podcast player that I kind of said like, you know what, I'm just going to do it like this for now. It's just going to be a modal. I'll make this better in the future. But that's like another thing where, I know like the steps to get there, but it was just like, if you want to ship stuff, you hit these points where like you have to cut things out and you have to say like, I'll do this later. And I know a lot of times later doesn't come for stuff, but like I'm prioritizing this stuff. So there's a lot to improve on with the podcast player. But I really want to make sure that the kind of like core experience is like really solid and really good. And, as I do a couple more bug fix releases and stuff like that, like every release makes it better and better. So, and then I can start focusing on the like feature improvements for it, not just the bug fixes for it. So we will get there, gang. We will get there. But that is it. So thank you for watching or listening, however you're enjoying this. I really appreciate it. If you want to subscribe, or I should say, actually, you should subscribe. What are you doing? If you watch this or listen to this and you didn't subscribe, what are you doing? That's kind of weird. So you can subscribe on YouTube. You can like this video on YouTube. You can subscribe to the podcast in your favorite podcast player, which is Sofa, obviously. You can check out Sofa. There's links to all this stuff in the description. That's my app. And I just want to say thanks for watching. Thanks for everyone who helped and supported for this launch. It has been, a long time coming with this. So it's always fun and exciting to release this stuff. But thank you everyone for the support and the feedback. And I'll see you next time. Bye.